it. Okay, thank you. Well, before we start, I just wanted to mention about few upcoming events run by the branch. So on Tuesday next week, we're having, on 3rd of May, we're having the local branch book club meeting, which is led by Judith McDonald, who is also joining us tonight. So if anyone is interested, please contact Judith for details. Another event we're running in May, well, there's actually quite a few in May. 11th of May, that's the student event. That's a branch follow-up from the student conference, which happened not long ago. Another event led also by Judith is on the 24th of May. It's benefits of CIPD membership. We would like to talk about. We would like to perhaps talk more about what sort of benefits you gain from being the CIPD member. Some of them may be less known, perhaps. And last but not least, 15th of June, we're having our annual meeting, which is going to be face-to-face, first time in over 2 years, so we're really excited about it. We are going to be joined by Linda O'Donnell, who will be using the Lumina Spark, which is a leadership tool. Everyone is welcome to come along to the juries in. It's very informal, so it's going to be an opportunity for networking, opportunity to catch up with people who you might have not seen for quite a long time. All of these events are on our CIPD website. They're also on the Eventbrite, and they'll be published on the social media too as we go along. That's that for the introduction of our branch. I would now like to welcome our two speakers for tonight. The topic for tonight is about volunteering experience, which is perhaps a bit less explored, as in how volunteers how volunteers committing their time to a cause, to a third sector organization, how they are looked after, how they are developed, and what are the sort of opportunities for them for further development, for further sort of professional progression, if you like. So I would like to first of all invite Heather Arney from Citizen Advice Bureau to give us a little bit of an insight from her perspective and also a bit of an introduction to herself. So thank you very much, and over to you, Heather.
Oops, right, okay. Hello, everybody. As you've just heard, I am Heather and we are Southwest Aberdeenshire Citizens Advice Bureau, so that's what SWA stands for. So we're SWACAB. Right, bear with me. So we're going to have a look tonight at who are we and what do we do. Now, I've only been in post 5 months, so obviously this has been very useful for me to do, actually pull all these slides together and actually sort of really get my head around, you know, what am I going to put in a presentation for yourselves. So we will get going. So the aims of CAB, and I presume all of you sitting here have heard of Citizens Advice Bureaus. Surprising actually how many people haven't, so I'm glad to hear you have. So one of the first ones is to ensure that individuals do not suffer through lack of knowledge of their rights and responsibilities or of the services available to them, or through an inability to express their needs effectively. And equally, to exercise a responsible influence on the development of social policies and services, both locally and nationally. Now, if I look at the first one, I can just, reading that first one out, I can see from the clients we do have come to use our services, they fit in amongst every one of those. They don't know what their rights are. They don't have capacity sometimes to actually access services or know where to find them, or they've got an inability to express themselves, and that can be for all sorts of reasons. It can be they're elderly and they don't know where to find things, they've got additional needs, or they just are not comfortable talking about issues that are affecting them. And the second one, which is actually very important, is we sit under the umbrella of Citizens Advice Scotland. So when we do all our case recordings, if there's certain things keep cropping up from clients that we have accessing the services, we take notes of these and then we sort of feed this back to CAS Scotland, and they will feed back to government and all sorts to try and, you know, influence policies going forward. And that one at the moment, we are playing a big part in sort of food vouchers because of obviously the cost of living. So we're part of a pilot sort of distributing food vouchers, not just from the food banks, because food banks going forward, they want to sort of minimize and give people a bit more choice and a bit more dignity. So we're part of that pilot, which will feed back into the government. And we're also very much part of the energy stuff at the moment, as again, kicking into the cost of living at the moment. So we're sort of feeding back and all that. So it's great to know it's not just what we're doing in our local community, it is also the influence we can have on policies and services locally and nationally going forward. Oh, it's this funny one, we've got to keep pressing the button. Right, there are 59 euro across Scotland, which is a considerable number. So all of you sitting here tonight, somewhere close by to you, hopefully within your area, you will find a Citizens Advice Bureau. And as I say, we have our main office from Swacab based in West Hill. It was originally established during World War II, so obviously got a long history behind it, and obviously it's developed over the years. And it's not just in Scotland; it's all across the United Kingdom. As I say, we sit under the CAS up in Scotland. This is a thing I didn't know about. Now, my own career has been across the entire health and safety. I started life nursing. And I went away into running a secure mental health unit and then a dementia unit, left nursing in my I was going to say late 80s, no, I'm not that old yet, in my late 30s. And I ended up, I've run addiction services. I've been a commissioning manager within a local authority running addiction services, criminal justice, targeted youth, offending. I've worked for Royal Blind and Scottish War Blinded as their development manager for Scotland. Also, I don't work for SACRO, which is criminal justice. I was chief exec of a homeless charity in Edinburgh for 5.5 years, where we had hostels, domestic abuse refuge, employability services and services in the community where we work with people who are either on the streets or at risk of homelessness. And I then moved up north. I've come back home. I know it doesn't sound like it from my accent, but I grew up living all over the world. Came home back to Murray because of personal circumstances. Really, didn't want to leave my job in Edinburgh, but I had no choice at the time. So here I am. I've then spent the last probably 2.5 years working for Action for Children with some of the most disadvantaged, marginalised families across Murray. And I've now come into post with CAB as the chief officer here 5 months ago. And where I'm going with this one is every service I've worked across, be it homeless, addictions, mental health, children and families, people with physical disabilities and additional needs. At some point, every one of the services I've had, we have referred somebody into a Citizens Advice Bureau. So it's nice to actually be part of, Citizens Advice. But what I didn't know until I started was each and every one of the CABs across the country is an independent charity. I actually thought CAB was just this massive, sort of organization, and it was all funded from the main sort of head office. It isn't. So each and every one of us has to find our own monies. We have to write bids, and we have to make sure we keep the charity going. And the nice thing is, each and every one of the charities across the country are all run by a committee of volunteers. So there's the first mention of volunteering. So in the first 3 months of this year alone, Southwest Aberdeenshire CAB has helped 600 people, and it's across a large geographical area. It's quite a huge area, but I'll get onto that when we start looking at sort of our outreach, because we don't just deliver out of West Hill. So what sort of issues do we deal with? This is a big one, and it's getting bigger. Debt, the amount of people presenting with debt. And I know I've got that further down in one of the slides, but it's really, we've seen an increase since we hit COVID. People lost jobs, people were furloughed. We're now out of COVID, and the debt number, people presenting with debt issues are seriously increasing still. Consumer issues, and that can be anything, across the range. At the moment, it tends to be energy companies, where they are people or consumers. Employment, that can be, even in the last week, we've had people who have been, dismissed, and they're sort of wanting to appeal. So we work very closely with ACAS with some of those things. Again, redundancies. Benefits is the biggest one. It's a lot of people phone in and there's all sorts of things going on. And we always do a benefit check to make sure people are getting the benefits they're entitled to. It's actually amazing how many people out there are not claiming the benefits they are entitled to claim, which links back to debt, because quite often somebody might phone up with a debt issue, and the first thing we might do is do the benefits check, and we'll realize they're actually not claiming the benefits they should be claiming. Legal issues.
Heather, we've had, sorry to interrupt, we've had one question so far asking if the Citizens Advice is a UK-wide organisation, or is it just Scotland? Or
no, it is UK-wide. So there's Citizens Advice England, and they'll sit under that umbrella, and the Citizens Advice Scotland, because of quite often that's to do with policies and stuff from the government and legal stuff. So it is very much, you know, but we're all one big sort of Citizens Advice. We just sit under the different countries.
Okay, thank you.
We deal with immigration and nationality, and that's increasing as well, you know, over the years, people wanting to know about rights to reside. And then we've got people coming in from, you know, all across the world now. And obviously we deal a lot with housing and sort of benefit claims for people looking to come and settle in Scotland. Housing is a big one, and that could be people at risk of eviction, people with rent arrears, and, you know, people with issues within their properties, particularly if they're renting from either social landlords or private renting. Eviction, I've just mentioned. And sadly, we have had one literally in the last 24 hours, a gentleman who has literally been had to hand the keys of his property over after 39 years mortgaged yesterday. Thankfully, we started working with him last week. He has moved into supported accommodation. Today, we are currently dealing with all his benefits and his PIP and everything else, which is personal independent payment stuff, and very much working hand in hand with other agencies to make sure he gets the emotional support he's needing at the moment. Homelessness, I'm going to say, if we hadn't managed to work very closely with, this was an example guy I've just mentioned, we hadn't worked closely with housing, we would have had this guy on the streets. But thankfully he has had his keys today to his new place, and Jonathan, one of our workers, has been in to see him today. I went and visited last week with Jonathan just to go through all the stuff with the gentleman concerned. So, but we could have had him on the streets. Now, we do get, sadly, a number of homelessness issues. Domestic abuse is a big one that's on the rise. People with addictions or mental health issues, not paying rent, and then get it, you know, sort of become evicted and they're out in the streets. And if they're intentionally homeless, which you have to prove to the local authority they're not, they have no right to really anything. Although they won't leave families on the street, they will put them somewhere. Be it B&B. Family and personal, that tends to be relationship issues. And again, in the last 24 hours, I had a conversation with a gentleman earlier. Relationship breakdown, joint bank account had been stopped, but some of the bills after that are supposed to be stopped by the bank were still going out from that joint bank account, which should now be in his name only. So that's sort of quite a muddled one at the moment. So we're in touch with the bank and with the energy providers, and because they've taken a big chunk of money out. So he's quite upset. And neighbour issues, it can be all sorts of things, you know, parties, sort of boundaries, all sorts. And health, that can be people trying to access health services and don't feel they're getting anywhere. We're going to doctors, sometimes we're advocating on their behalf around the services they should be entitled to and be receiving. So as you can see, that's just some of the issues. We deal with all sorts, keeps us all busy. Right, so what did we do? Now I've got from 2020 to 2021 there. It's actually 1 year. So if I look at, where are we, 2022? That should actually be 2021, January 21 to January of this year. So in 1 year, we had 2,758 people accessing the service. Now, with those people accessing that, we get the number of contacts. Now, some people might be a one-off call and we can deal with it quite quickly and that's it done. But the number of contacts for those people was 8,828. Client financial gain was £1,638,637.91. And that is based on people not claiming the right, and this is just for our area, for just the Southwest Aberdeenshire area alone. So that's people not claiming the amount of the right benefits and not, you know, getting everything they're entitled to. It was consumer issues, it was debt, it was utilities, it was tax. I mean, it was a multitude, but that's a huge sum of money that we've managed to get for our clients. And then you see the level of debt handled, 883,000. That's a huge sum of money. Now, for those of you who know this area, know West Hill, and you know the area which I'll go into when I look at our outreach, Ballater, Braemar, Boyne, Banchory, people think of that area as being moneyed. But there's obviously huge numbers of issues within our communities. This is the great one. CABs have always been set up to very much have volunteers as the lifeline of the services. So 65% of our staff are volunteers. From a wealth of backgrounds, we've got young people coming into it either to do admin work or want to be advisors. A couple of them are law students, which is great. Funny enough, I've had another one interested today, yet another law student. So they obviously see this as a way of sort of learning and training. We have got retired people, we've got ex-solicitors, we've got an ex-anaesthetist, people from business backgrounds. So there's a wealth of, you know, sort of different types of people with different backgrounds and different age, you know, young mums looking to return to work. We've got 2 started actually in the last month, which is great, and want to sort of go on and, you know, get jobs going forward. So that is a huge number of volunteers, and we're very proud of that. Now you're getting the... So our staff, what do? We have volunteer advisors. We have paid caseworkers and paid advisors, because some of it is specialized. We have session supervisors. Session supervisors are absolutely fantastic. They oversee all the work the volunteers are doing through the day, and they're necessary because some of the cases are quite complex. And case checkers, everything has to be recorded. The clients are all aware of this, and it's to check that the person who's been working with a client through any session has actually done everything they should have done, and we've not missed anything. So it's really guaranteeing sort of all our clients that they are getting a professional, fantastic service. Paid management, of which I am one. Well, I'm the only one. I'm it. And support staff. So we have to have admin support and, you know, coordination, project coordination support. Paid admin clerical staff. Volunteer admin staff, and which are absolute godsends. We have 3 that come in and do volunteer admin work, and they really, really do help the whole bureau run smoothly, and I don't know where we'd be without them. And volunteer social policy workers, as I mentioned earlier, social policy is so important. So we have volunteers, we have 2 that are particularly interested in making sure that social policy can be looked at and changed throughout the country. And they pick up on attending those meetings and reporting back into CAS so it can be reported up. And the board, as I mentioned earlier, all our board, great board, and all say wealth of experience from across all sorts of sectors. They're all volunteers, and we meet every 6 weeks. And they're great board because they're now really enthusiastic about attending additional meetings for funding and looking at social media and making sure we're out there. So as you can see, there's a wealth of opportunities for anybody to look to come into volunteering and to actually determine what might suit them or they'd be interested in. Right, types of generalist advice. Now, most of the calls will come in, they're picked up, and we have to determine what level of advice are they looking for. It is free, and that's the good one. Nobody's charged anything. It's independent, it's impartial, and it's across a wealth of, as I mentioned earlier, a wealth of different subject matters. Large majority of these clients are seen or spoken to on the phone or like this by our volunteers. And we offer the both one-off advice, and it might be just somebody needs that advice on that particular day to go forward and is then happy enough to go off and do their own thing, or they now know what they need to know, and ongoing casework. We have some clients who've been with us for over a year because of quite sort of complex issues. Now, the specialist advice, this is all carried out by our trained paying staff, more trained staff. We have money advice casework. So MTT is the money talk teams. We have help to claim, and that's, they're very, very busy lines. We have debt service. We have a level 3 debt advisor. So that's going all the way up to potential bankruptcy, which is sequestration. And the increase in numbers of sequestration in the last 18 months has been quite considerable. We have a considerable number of clients who are now on DAS schemes, which is debt arrangement schemes, rather than putting them down the bankruptcy route, because a lot of people do come in, I want to declare myself bankrupt, but we don't just do that. We have to look at alternatives before we ever, agree to look to taking somebody down to bankruptcy.
Yeah, Heather, I've got another question in from Talia. The volunteers, what kind of, do they come direct from businesses? You have mentioned like mums and students, but do you get a lot of volunteers that are sent by businesses?
No, sadly, no. And that's a real shame. And it is, because I think that's something we really would like to see going forward. It tends to be people find out about us themselves. And it might be because we've got it out in social media. Funny enough, this week it's going out in our social media from across the Grampian bureaus, because I actually lead that team of the social media people. They work very, it's funny enough, a team of volunteers who work together. So we have joint stuff going out to attract more volunteers and people to consider coming in to do this. And no, it tends to be people see something, will be on the West Hill Bulletin in the next month, and it'll be about volunteering again. So it tends to be individuals from a wealth of backgrounds think, I fancy going and finding out more about that. But businesses approaching us, sadly, no. And that's something we really would like to encourage.
Yeah, because we did in our previous discussion mention that a lot of the businesses now have an ESG policy strategy, and the S part, the social part, would actually fall within businesses sending volunteers with, to the citizens' advice. So that's
absolutely.
Point.
Yes. But if I may, because specifically you mentioned about the sort of tasks and involvement volunteers may get into, and some of that is quite specialized. Some of that requires quite a wealth of previous knowledge and experience. So
with our volunteers, no, I'll go into that further in the slides about the training, because that's why we do have to have some paid staff. Because the more specialized stuff, which I've got here at the moment, has to have people who have studied further and have got that knowledge. However, generalist advisors, no, they're not. You're not expected to come in as a generalist advisor, as a volunteer, and know all this stuff. And what is amazing with Citizens Advice is the wealth of information on our systems, and it's incredible. So the learning to do that is where you find out the most up-to-date information on any subject matter, so that any advice you're giving somebody is the most up-to-date you can give them.
Yeah, and I think Laura's mentioned that there are similarities with the CIPD and the Citizens Advice. They're both charities run by volunteers, but they have paid staff. So there might be some future synergy there that we could work with. So
absolutely, yeah, and I'm all for synergies, absolutely. Energy is one of our specialists. We have 2 energy advisors who are paid, and it might come through as a call, and one of the generalist advisors, quite often a volunteer, will be picking up. If it's more complex energy cases, they will get passed across to the paid energy advisors. Again, today, this was today, and this has been happening more frequently because of the cost of oil and gas and electric and everything else, is we are getting more and more people phoning in with energy issues. The one we've had today is yet again a mother with small children has had her power cut off totally. This happened a few weeks ago, so we are working very closely with her because there is debt stuff there. There's all sorts of other issues going on. But today, this afternoon, we've managed to get vouchers. We've managed to get it topped up, and she is back on. But that's not the end of it. We need to work with her going forward and her energy companies. And I know part of the afternoon by one of our advisors was spent speaking to the energy company, explaining, well, we get that she's in arrears, but she has got children. we need to. So we work very closely with all, the electric, gas, the only thing that we have spotted, which you will probably have all picked up on the news, is there's an awful lot of people up in rural areas are on oil. And there's no price cap for that. And we are getting more and more people phoning in about their oil bills. And there's very little we can do about that one, sadly. We can work, we can work with oil companies, and they're fully aware that we're monitoring all this. And again, it's going back to the social policy stuff. Gambling support, that sounds like a funny one. We have a specific gambling support team. And that is, we've obviously, like most addictions, gambling has definitely increased through lockdown. It was always thought it was just people going off to betting shops. So there is more and more gambling online, the bingo sites. One of the things the research done over lockdown discovered more and more older people, elderly people, were starting to go onto more of these sites, probably because they're worrying about paying bills. And the increase in young people, starting much younger ages, like about 7, 8 or 9, when they're playing their games and they're building up their little pot of pretend money, are then going on to become teenagers and starting to go onto the sites where you can bet on other stuff. And gambling is seeing a huge increase. And we do see the impact of that. People have lost their homes, people have lost relationships. So gambling, it's great to see that at long last the government, and it is, it's funded by Gamble Aware. We've just been awarded another 3 years worth of funding, which is great. They have to be seen like the drink company, which was Drink Aware, did the same thing with, putting money into the addiction services. But it's good to see that gambling is now being taken seriously. So we have a gambling support service, which is not just about working with clients and their debt and everything else, but it's also about, we go out and train. We have a great worker who goes in and trains. She's currently working in Peterhead Prison and down in HMP Perth, but not with the people in the prison, not with the offenders. She's working with the staff, because some of them will be coming out of that prison, they'll have Liberation Day and potentially could go out and start gambling. So it's about the prison officers being aware of what to pick up on. Was there a gambling issue? What can they do? And then they either refer into us, or at least they can have those conversations. So we're going to be working within the local authority, within the NHS, to try and make sure more and more people start picking up on the signs that there's maybe an issue with somebody gambling. Quite common, sadly, in mental health services as well. And pension-wise, now you probably have all heard of pension-wise. That is a government thing. It is Citizens Advice Bureau that delivers this. So we have a pension-wise advice worker. He's a specialist, he knows his stuff, and they actively encourage most people coming up to pension age to actually get in touch with PensionWise before they make any decisions about what they're going to do with their pensions going forward. He is also informing there's a big increase in people considering withdrawing all their pensions. Now, we're not there to advise people what to do with their pensions, but it's to make sure they have all the relevant advice. So that's our sort of specialist side. Now, outreach, this was, I think, really here is to say, this is the areas we cover. We deliver outreach in Ballater, we go to Braemar, we go to Aboyne, Banchory, Kemnay, Afford, and we do home visits. So when you look at that, that's a big geographical area. Now, we're not a huge team. So we spend 1 day a week in Kemnay. We have an office space there. I mean, okay, we rent it. It's not like the big one we've got up in West Hill. We've got Banchory again. We've got a big space within the high street down there, sadly not being as used as much as it should be, but we're working on that. And Aboyne, we also have a room that we rent down there, which is Aboyne is very well used, and we're in there every Thursday. And then Braemar and Ballater, we work very closely with the village halls and the GP practice to have a space, and home visits where necessary, because some people really can't come out. And as I say, the gentleman I said about who sadly has lost his home, we had to do a home visit to him last week, and he has moved into his supported accommodation today, and he's had a home visit. So say it's across. So volunteering, this is what this is about. So volunteers are invited to undertake an agreed set number of hours per week, and we normally would like those to be on regular days of the week, and we will be flexible. We try to be flexible, although we require a pledge of time from volunteers because it allows us to better plan activities and services about who's where. We're not asking for a huge number of hours. We sort of look for about 6 minimum a week. And we have quite a number of volunteers who do 1 day a week. I've got a couple of volunteers who do 2 days, and they might come in for 4 hours in 1 day and then be back the next day for 3 hours. That's fine. But they do all do the same days. So they receive initial and ongoing training to ensure they're fully equipped with the knowledge and the confidence to provide the public with good quality advice and information, because we are obviously judged on the quality advice and what information we give. So we have to make sure all members of the team, volunteers and paid staff, are confident enough and have got the knowledge they need to be able to deliver that.
How, Heather, how long is that training then normally for
Well, that's what I'm just going to say. Everybody has, and I've been in post 5 months. I've had to do this as well. It's called the Advisor Training Program, ATP. It's when we were shut through lockdown, this was delivered online and it was delivered much quicker. It was done over 4 weeks. Normally it's taking months because you'll do a bit online on e-learn. And then now, because we're open up and running again, people will be in the bureau and they will get sort of training there. So, and they do shadowing, they have mentors. One nice thing recently, we had a bid that we submitted to, who did we submit it to? Oh God, this is terrible. Robertson Trust, was it? No, this is bad. No, the National Lottery Community Fund. Sorry, I'm always writing bids. National Lottery, we've had that agreed about 6 weeks ago, but this is confidential because it's not in the press yet. It's being advertised in the press by them on the 11th of May. So obviously, this, keep that to yourselves. But we've been awarded money for 3 years to actually employ a full-time training officer. That will be fantastic. At the moment, it's the session supervisors and paid staff are also trying to mentor and train people doing the programs. So hopefully we will have somebody in place within the next 2 to 3 months. Will be fantastic. But everybody must complete this program. And it's a balance, but it's a fantastic program to say, because I've not long done it myself, of materials online and face-to-face training sessions within the Bureau.
So
and because of the experience of the staff, you get really good training.
Heather, it's me again. Sam has asked, how long do your volunteers stay with you normally?
We've got volunteers who have been with us 10 years, 15 years. Sadly, we had one leave us last week. She started life as a volunteer with us. She then became, I can't remember what she became after that. She left us, she's retired after 12 years as a session supervisor.
Okay.
So yeah, we've got people, in general, most of them have been here with us years, and I'm hoping the newish ones will be staying as well for years. And if some of them only stay a year or 2 years because they want it to just gain confidence or further knowledge to move on to careers, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But they do tend to stay. I mean, it can be a stressful environment because you're dealing with all sorts of issues, but it's very satisfying. The team is great, honestly. I mean, and I'm not just saying this, I've been there 5 months. I am so impressed with the team. They are so committed, they're so dedicated, they really want to make a difference to, the people we're working with, and, they'll go the extra mile, and you couldn't ask for more. So it's fantastic training, and I'm not just saying that because I have recently done it. I don't expect anybody to do something I haven't done. So reasons people might consider volunteering with citizens advice, and it's really stimulating. I've just said that it can be stressful, but it's stimulating. There's always lots of different things to do, and again, it doesn't matter whether it's admin or generalist advising. No day is ever the same. You don't know what you're going to be dealing with. You can help in a way that suits the time you can spare and the skills you can offer. So again, some people might say they want to come in. In fact, we had one lady start probably about 18 months ago as a volunteer admin person. She is now a generalist advisor volunteering because she was listening to what was going on and decided she fancied trying that. Absolutely loves it. You can learn new skills. You certainly gain a lot. I've learned so much in the last 5 months. You can learn new skills and improve your own confidence. I'm sure none of you need that, but just say it's something we'd say to any potential volunteer. Very comprehensive bureau training and supervision. So you do get lots of support along the way. And as I say, from the team. I've seen it. I've seen what they do. They will have people shadowing. They will shadow them. They, you know, they never let anybody who's not comfortable go on working with a client for the first time on their own till we know they're happy enough and the client, you know, that the volunteer is comfortable enough to do it. Now, one of our young ladies, the young mum who did her training through lockdown, who is now in the bureau, it's amazing how well she's doing. But initially it was, oh no, I don't know if I want to do this because I'm now in the bureau. I saw her last Thursday and she's not going to be long before she's off and running. And she really absolutely is thoroughly enjoying it. So lots of people who have come through, and this is all CAVs, not just us, have moved on to paid work further in education. I can think of 3 of the paid staff we have who started as WellCAV volunteers. One of them is now our paid level 3 top level debt advisor. You know, so there's opportunity, and I say that's what it does, helps people move on to paid work or further education. That's fantastic. You do get a buzz, and you do get a real buzz from helping yourself learn more and have knowledge, but also helping those around you. And I don't just mean the clients, I mean the team as well, because we've all got different backgrounds and we all bring in, you know, a whole sort of different perspective on things. So we have great team meetings. We really do. They're fascinating. You meet lots of new interesting people and make new friends, and they are a good bunch. They're always, you know, off out having evenings out. I don't, unfortunately, would go with them because I live in Murray and it's a long drive back, so I don't go and have a drink and then drive. The one thing that, you know, for anybody who's looking for a job, people worry about volunteering. Would it affect their benefits? No, it doesn't. Now, this, I suppose, is the most important one. What do our volunteers say? They're valued, they're challenged, and they're informed. A fresh challenge and different experience each time where you feel committed, motivated, and helping the public address their issues, whether dealing with face-to-face, clients face-to-face, over the phone, or via email. For me, working with the CAV as a volunteer advisor is rewarding as it gives me the opportunity to help empower fellow citizens. In a world full of worry and anxiety, it's very satisfying to help relieve our clients' problems. You can see these are all coming from different people and different types of thinking. Very satisfying use of my spare time, helping people find a solution to any problem they have. A way of meeting new people, listening to their worries, then helping them find a solution. And the last 2, as you can see, finding solutions. And I think that's what most people get out of either being a paid member of staff or a volunteer, is finding solutions for people without telling them what to do, giving them the information that can then help them to get their solution, and we're there for them to help them through that journey. And if you would like to find out more, if you go on to Citizens Advice Scotland, so cath.org.uk, it'll tell you a bit more. So that's me in a quick nutshell tour of Citizens Advice.
Thank you very much, Heather. That was a really interesting insight to the Citizens Advice Bureau, which I knew very little about prior to this. Another question from one of the attendees, Sam, has asked, what do you do to retain volunteers? Because obviously a lot of your volunteers stay with you for a very long time. So is there anything specifically that Citizens Advice Bureau do to retain their volunteers?
Well, we always, I mean, we are a really close team, and I would say it's the same probably in all Citizens Advice Bureaus, because we value our volunteers so much, because they are the heart of what we do, and that's how they were set up as volunteers originally, is if they want further training. I mean, our CAS e-learn system is superb, the amount of information on there. If they want they attend meetings, we do have meetings with them. They're very much part of the team. They're treated just the same as any paid member of staff. So any additional training or anything they think, oh, I'm actually really quite interested in finding out more on that side of things, we will have that. We include them in everything. They get invited to any sort of event that's going on outside of work, being, you know, a drink or a meal or lunch. I don't, it's not happened till I've come in here, but I've always valued volunteers. At Christmas time, we made sure they all got a card and a gift delivered to their homes. We've had one lady just today has finally signed off. She is now an official advisor. She's completed all her training. So I've already arranged with the session supervisor. She will get given a bouquet of flowers tomorrow and a card and saying congratulations, well done. So it's about looking after them, that you genuinely care and you know them. You get to know, I know all of them. I've made sure I've got to know all of them. You find out about the individual. But again, listening to what is it they want to do going forward. We've got some volunteers who've been with us for years who very much like a specific thing and they carry on doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that. I think we'll leave any other questions till the end of the session, and I'll hand back to Natalia and Adrian again.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Heather, for your time and for presenting us with what Citizen Advice Bureau does. That's really useful and really interesting. But now I would like to invite Adrian Murtagh, who is head of volunteer experience at Volunteer Scotland, to talk to us about voluntary experience, I guess. Thank you, and over to you, Adrian. You're on mute.
I know all these years and I forget about mute. Let me just get my slides up. Okay. That was really good, Heather. And it's nice to see a side of volunteering. And as you said, Heather, and I would agree with you, I've been sending people to CAB for years, and I've even used the services myself when I was made redundant. So absolutely brilliant organisation, and highly recommend it. And I think everyone should understand what CAB does for our local communities. But what I wanted to talk to you today about was really about volunteering in the wider sense, about what's going on in Scotland. A bit like Heather, my background's in nursing, started as a psyche nurse, worked in social work, and a bit like yourself, Heather, been around different aspects of the third sector, but always been in that sort of caring industry, if you want to use that phrase. Been with Volunteer Scotland now for about 8 years. I'm the head of volunteer practice. Everything that we do within the team is really about improving the volunteer experience. What we know for a fact is if people have a good experience, they'll come back. It's as simple as that. So what we do is we develop different tools, different learning materials, different approaches that will always look to improve the volunteer experience for somebody who engages in volunteering within any organisation within Scotland. So what I want to do is just give you a flavour of some of the stats, give you some of the definitions, and just share some of the tools that we use to really make sure that everyone gets that good experience and gets that opportunity to learn, grow and develop. So Volunteer Scotland, we're based in Stirling. We are the national agency for developing volunteering in Scotland. It's one of the very few charities I've been involved in where we were set up over 30 years ago to develop volunteering in Scotland, and we're still developing volunteering in Scotland. So I think that's brilliant because basically some charities sort of lose their way, or they take on different responsibilities, or they change their core business. I'm really proud and really pleased to say that Volunteer Scotland has got a wealth of experience and knowledge about really what makes a good volunteer experience, and also relates to and responds to the changing environment that we're all in, because volunteering has to change. Volunteering has to grow, and volunteering has to do different things to keep in pace with societal changes, but also keep in pace with what people want. So the two big bits of the organisation, one is Volunteer Scotland, and we've got research, we've got learning, and we basically have IT that runs the national database for volunteering, and also runs our own website that's got a wealth of information and materials in there about volunteering. The other bit of the organisation is disclosure services, and that's basically your Pvg scheme. So if a volunteering opportunity needs to get a sort of a police check, or needs to be looked at in a certain way, then basically what happens, it goes through what we call our Pvg scheme. Not all roles need to go through that. It's dependent on the role, and it's dependent on another few different factors. So what is volunteering? We, as in Scotland, we have a national framework, which is really, really positive and really good. Not everyone has one. And basically, the big thing that we keep reminding everybody is that volunteering is a choice. It's a free choice of people giving time and giving their energy and their knowledge and expertise without any financial gain. And that's really important, that it's a free choice. And it's really important that we monitor the financial gain side of it, because we can very easily drop into unpaid work. And that's not what volunteering is. Volunteering is a freedom of choice. Volunteering is that somebody wants to choose to do something, and volunteering is no financial gain. Yes, there will be expenses, but the expenses have to relate to the volunteering opportunity and the volunteer task. But the big side of that is that we're not doing this, and it's not a waged or salary activity. For the first time, we started to look at volunteering in a sort of scale. So down on the left-hand side, and you would have all seen this in COVID, a lot of activity around communities, around neighbourliness, moving into the informal side of volunteering, and then moving into the semi-formal and formal side of volunteering. So, you know, there's some examples down there, you know, like clubs and organisations, as it says here, you know, helping out neighbours, clothes donations, and any other one getting involved in school activities and stuff like that. So that's the sort of spectrum of volunteering that actually happens within our communities. And I'm sure you can see some of your activity in there. If I was to look at that, I'm probably in the neighbourliness thing because I walk the dog for a neighbour at the moment, and I'm certainly in the formal one because I volunteer for a charity in the north of Glasgow, riding for the disabled. So they're the sort of two bits of where my activity is. We know that within the national framework, we talk about the benefits, and there's physical health benefits, there's social benefits, and really what we like to talk about is the benefits to our communities, the benefits to the individuals, and also the benefits to the organisations that are running the volunteer programme. And as Heather showed you there, there's a lot of service delivery that happens there through the volunteer programme, and there's a lot of benefits to the local people in the community because that service is actually supporting them around a range of issues like, you know, debt management, gambling, and the stuff that Heather showed us. Why is it important? Well, here's some really big numbers, right? So basically, a lot of people think about volunteering in a very small way because sometimes that's what they connect with. You know, a couple of volunteers come together, maybe 20, 30 people. But there's actually some real big numbers behind volunteering when you actually look on it at a Scottish level. And here, you know, the one that I think is really interesting here is it's over 100,000 full-time equivalents. You know, that's a lot of people giving a lot of things to our communities. You know, and I think it's important that we actually, and this comes from the Scottish Household Survey that's out, I think, every 2 years. And I think it's really important that we start celebrating these numbers. And I think it's really important that we start highlighting these numbers because volunteering really contributes to our economy. It really contributes to our communities, and volunteering really contributes to the growth of Scotland. And I think it's important that we actually understand that and we actually start looking at the benefits that it's bringing to Scotland. What the current thinking is, well, volunteering is a good thing. It's good for the person who's volunteering, and it's good for the service provider or the person receiving the service. It's a positive positive both in a health sense, but it also has well-being impact in a general sense. And the more you volunteer, the more benefits you get from it. So the more time that you spend volunteering, then the bigger the benefits that you get. Also, certain things that we understand and we know is that the majority of people, I know this is very simple, but it's very powerful. The majority of people volunteer because they've been asked. The majority of people will volunteer because they believe in the cause. And the majority of people will volunteer because a trusted person in their network will say, have you thought about volunteering? So we sort of know these things, and it's important that we start to learn how people connect with volunteering. The volunteer journey, this is some research we did around about 2014, and this is what volunteers tell us. You know, so basically they go through a phase about thinking about volunteering. They then go into a phase about getting started. Well, how do I start? Who do I talk to? Where do I go? And then they start understanding that they're making a difference, that they're actually getting some reward out of it, that they're actually starting to learn new skills, that they're actually feeling, and again, Heather mentioned it in some of the bullet points from her volunteers, they feel they're making a difference, you know, and that's the motivation, that's what keeps them going. And then basically building on success, you know, what else can I do? Or I've had a really good volunteer experience, I've really enjoyed what I'm doing, I'd like to now stop. Because again, it's freedom of choice. People can stop whenever they want to. Some people will come to a natural break where they just want to stop volunteering at the moment. Or some people might say, I'll do it for this long and then I'll just basically move on. So it's entirely up to themselves. But this is what volunteers tell us, the sort of little life cycle that they go on and the sort of journey that they go on. The current position of volunteering in Scotland. Well, as you can see from here, the rates are pretty, sorry, I need to move that screen. The rates are pretty level. You know, with 2007, we had 30% of Scottish adults over 16 engaging in some volunteering activity. We're at 26%. So I think there's been a consistent level there for over a long period of time. So people do volunteer, people enjoy volunteering, people can see the benefits of volunteering. Is there any difference in ages? Well, again, the yellow is 2018 and the blue is 2020. I think, you know, there's not much of a change over time. You know, there are certain things that people are doing. There are certain policies coming in that may affect volunteering. You know, there's been a big push around youth volunteering. There's also some conversations going on with the extension of the retirement age. Will that affect volunteering? No, so there are some sort of policies going on within our society that might affect some of these rates. But again, as you can see, there's a lot of people volunteering in all age groups. The other thing that we do know that is if somebody volunteers at a young age, the chances of them connecting with it later on in life are higher. So they might stop, they might go to further education, they might go and start a job, they might have a period where they don't volunteer, but the chances are they'll bump back into it somewhere else in their life because they had that experience when they were younger. Adults, again, volunteering, this is to do with gender, males and females, males being in the red line and females being in the blue line. For the first time, as you can see, around about 2020, it started the males started to increase, whereas before from 2007 there's been a gap in there. Again, the figures are quite consistent, but it's interesting, you know, that there's a slight increase in male volunteering because at some points there was a lot of discussion about how do we increase male activity within volunteering. So again,
Adrian, I'm wondering, that's really interesting statistic there that male volunteering is starting to slightly increase female volunteers. Is there anything, any particular reason, any timing issue, anything like that?
To be honest with you, I don't know at this stage, but again, some of it could be that males are starting to understand what volunteering is. Some of it could be that males are starting to understand the benefits of volunteering, or some of the opportunities are becoming more attractive to male volunteers. But to answer your question, I'm not really sure at this stage, but I do think it's quite an interesting sort of trend. And it'd be interesting to see if that continues or whether it's just a blip. Is what happens in statistics. So again, informal volunteering. Basically, again, these are some of the activities that people are saying that they're connecting with and the things that they're doing within the local community. So like keeping in touch with somebody, who's possibly at risk. Again, a big increase in that area, which is lovely to see and really good to see. And then down, maybe down the middle, down there, routine house cleaning and chores and laundry and gardening. And then the other one, maybe helping with personal care. So again, there's a sort of range of things that people have been doing, which is like the informal side of it, like the sort of helping out side of it. Formal side of the volunteering, well, again, local community neighbourhood, they get involved in things at a local level, looking into hobbies and recreation, getting involved in some sort of hobby that they relate to, that they enjoy, and then maybe down the bottom, emergency services, first aid. So again, a range of activities that people get involved in volunteering. Top three there, around youth, around health, around religious beliefs, around local communities. And that picture hasn't really changed that much. But again, as new opportunities are coming through and as new things start developing, some of this might actually change. Volunteering is good for you, as I said earlier on. It's good for your well-being. There's a lot of evidence coming through and a lot of good quality evidence saying that, if you volunteer, it has a positive effect on your well-being. Volunteering can have a positive impact on your physical health, mental health, and individual well-being. Volunteering can support individuals' well-being alongside medical care, social connections, and other activities. There is a couple of projects and a couple of activities around a concept called social prescribing, where actually what they try and do is they help an individual with some other activities, and volunteering is sometimes in that, where, by people interacting with other people through volunteering, it can sometimes have a benefit to them, both physically and psychologically. Some of the sort of breakdown there, the mental health issues, it can, some evidence showing that it can have a reduction in anxiety and stress, depression, social isolation, and then the other side of it is physical side, creating healthy behaviours, and looking at coping with illness and a sort of general side of it. Does it improve life expectancy? I think the jury's still out in there, but there is some sort of there is some anecdotal evidence in there that as people volunteer at older age, it certainly helps with things like isolation, loneliness, and which could lead into depression and anxiety. These are the things that volunteers tell us why they volunteer, to gain new skills, to keep active, to meet new people, to be with friends. Some of these are similar to the ones that Heather was sharing with us. But this is why, some people want to volunteer and what they get out of volunteering. The other one that you hear quite a lot, which is very humbling and very positive, is like to give back. People feel that they want to give something back to our communities. Good volunteer practice. What we do is we build a lot of good volunteer practice around this model. So it's about organisations who involve volunteers. We ask them to think about why they want to involve volunteers. I know that might seem a very simple question, but it's a very powerful question. Why involve volunteers in your organisation? How are you going to get started? How are you going to welcome them? How are you going to be ready for them? And then making a difference. What difference will these volunteers make? And then building on success. How can you build on the success of your volunteer programme? So they're very similar to the volunteer life cycle. That's deliberate. But basically what we want organisations to do is really start to understand these questions when they're either developing a volunteer programme or when they're running a volunteer programme, because this gives you the foundation of good volunteer practice. We've got some volunteer good practice tools, and one of them being the volunteer charter. The volunteer charter helps you make the distinction between a paid job and volunteering, so that we don't end up in that grey area or accidentally stumble into that unpaid role. Investing in volunteers and volunteer friendly are both, investing in volunteers is a UK award, and I know that quite a few cabs have achieved it, where basically what happens is we will send in a team of assessors They will speak to paid staff if there are any paid staff. They will speak to volunteers. They will speak to the board, and they basically get an idea about what the volunteer experience is like. So we're looking for some levels of evidence. We're looking to interview volunteers, and then we come to a judgment. Do you make the standard, and can we issue the investing in volunteer equality mark? And volunteer friendly is very similar, but that's mainly aimed to the small charities. So basically that's charities with an income less than, I think, about £200,000. But the other side of it, which is really good, is it's aimed at the very small local groups where there's some excellent volunteer practice, but they've never had an opportunity to celebrate it, and they've never had an opportunity to actually showcase it. So really excited about volunteer friendly, and we're getting some really good connections and a lot of good organisations joining that. Employer supported volunteers, you've mentioned that, you know, basically it's been around for years. We sometimes get interest in it and it dies away, and then people get interested in it again. Basically sometimes sits within corporate social responsibility activity, but what it is it's about the employee connecting with a volunteering organisation to participate in volunteering. Some things I know about it, basically a lot of it is sometimes task-based. Most employers give anything between 2 to 3 days. The most I've ever heard is 5 days. And basically sometimes they do it as a team, sometimes they do it as an individual. Sometimes the employer allows the volunteer to find their own opportunities, or sometimes the employer will align themselves with an organisation or a charity, and then basically try and use employer supported volunteering to support that charity's cause. Future developments within volunteering, well, the big one's digital. So how can we volunteer in a digital age? How can we volunteer via Zoom? How can we volunteer via Facebook? How can we actually create a volunteering environment or opportunity via social media or via digital sort of presence? So that's really exciting, some of the stuff coming through there and some of the things that people are thinking about. Inclusion, how do we make our volunteering inclusive to everybody? That's very challenging for some organisations, but certainly it's a conversation that we're having, and it's certainly a conversation that we're driving around how do we actually truly make our volunteering inclusive to everyone. Again, the measurement, how do we actually understand the impact that volunteering's not only given to the individual and given to the organisation, but how do we measure the impact it's given to society? Different volunteering opportunities. Heather, close your ears at this moment. Not everybody wants to do the traditional volunteering. So basically what we're starting to see is a change where people are looking for episodic volunteering, people are looking for short connections and out. You know, so, you know, things are changing in society and volunteering's changing as well. So,
and Adrian, sorry to stop you for a moment, but would you be able to expand on this? Like, what do you mean by episodic volunteering? What's that change?
Yeah, well, basically, I know of some organisations that are saying, come and volunteer for us for an hour. That's it.
Oh.
You know, some organisations come and volunteer for us for this short period of time. You know, maybe a couple of hours, a couple of days. Come and volunteer for this one activity. Come and volunteer at the Kilt Walk. You know, so it's moving away from come and volunteer with us for a year. Come and volunteer with us for a long period of time. Now, not everybody wants to do that, but that's the way things are moving. And that's the way some people are connecting with volunteering, where they just want to do one thing. They just want to do a survey. They just want to do a focus group. They just want to do one activity, and then they're moving on.
So is this a problem? Is this something that is, I don't know, negative, or is that just a change that is happening?
I think it's really positive because, again, volunteering is freedom of choice. So what we should have is we should have more choice for people, because not one can sign up and say, I'll give you 6 hours every week. You know, so therefore, if we're wanting volunteering to be inclusive and for everyone, then basically what we need to do is create different opportunities for everyone.
So it's like more like task-based rather than time or commitment-based.
No, I still think there's time and commitment there. You know, you've got to volunteer for that activity. So I wouldn't say it's just task-based. I would say what it's about is it's about people fitting into maybe shorter periods of time. So it's shorter periods of commitment.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Youth volunteering, again, youth volunteering is always a positive sort of driver, because again, we know the positivity that volunteering has on young people, but the other side of it is we also know, as I said earlier on, that if young people have a good volunteer experience early on in their life, the chances are they'll come back to it later on, which is really important. And then, you know, volunteering just makes Scotland a better place. You know, it improves community spirit, it improves our health, it makes us more active, it supports over 75s, it's tackling with deprivation and inequality and reducing loneliness. You know, these are just some of the big things that we're starting to see and starting to gather evidence around that this is the impact that volunteering is having. Okay, listen, I'll leave it there, but I hope that gave you a sort of flavour of what volunteering is like in Scotland at the moment, and some ideas about where it might be heading. So thanks for your time there.
Thank you. Could I ask a quick question? Sorry, it's Shona here. Just wondering, do you have a minimum age with regard to youth volunteering?
No, there's not a minimum age, but we do know that there's some issues. Some groups find difficulties basically taking some young people. Once you start getting down to 13 and 14, we know that some groups have difficulties in either servicing or either supporting that age. Some groups have difficulties. I've heard some groups getting difficulties with insurance.
Yeah,
you know, so
that's what I was wondering about.
We know there are some challenges in there, but you know, once you get to about 15, 16 and above, basically it's usually okay. I mean, I volunteer with my daughter, and we've been doing it for a long while at Riding for the Disabled, and one of the reasons why we ended up there, because my daughter was 13 at the time, was volunteering, even though I was saying no, that she's coming with me and we're going to volunteer together, but I found it very difficult to get a place.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I guess that's
Can I say something?
Yeah, Heather, I was about to ask if there was a minimum age for citizens' advice as well.
No, we wouldn't take young people on because of the nature of what we're dealing with. But I just wanted to say to Adrian, thank you so much for giving me some ideas. When you said close my ears, I thought, focus group surveys, we're always looking for people to do that, and the staff and the volunteers don't have time. And I'm thinking, there's a way forward. So thank you for that, Adrian.
Absolutely no problem, Heather. And
I wrote it down.
More than happy to have a chat with you, because again, what we just need to do is change our mindset a slightly different way, because there's lots of things volunteers can do.
Oh, absolutely. So thank you.
Yeah, well, one thing I wanted to mention, it really is sort of what we were talking about with Adrian, Adrian, sorry, I keep confusing your day with my son's day. What we've been talking when I first invited Adrian to this event was sort of about joining forces or sort of similarities between Cipd and the volunteer standard, if you like. So in the same way as we have the Cipd profession map, there is also something that I didn't mention that is also set up for volunteers. The sort of I don't know if I understood it well, Adrian. So please correct me if I'm wrong. But a sort of like a development map or a path that you are trying to make more formal. Is that? Am I understanding this right, actually? Because that was really interesting.
Yeah. No, basically, what we're looking at doing is we're trying to create an industry standard around volunteering. That's the journey we're going. So that basically, people like Heather will have a certain standard of training, a certain standard of support, a certain standard of engaging volunteers, so that there's something Heather can benchmark her practice against. So that's basically what we're trying to create, and we're starting that journey pretty soon. And I was just, saying, because I know you guys are into sort of standards and industry sort of benchmarking, if there was some synergy there where we could go along that journey together.
I think that could be really interesting, because our Wimbledon head office is looking at the investors, investing volunteers, and doing some work in that respect, but they're just a little bit like you, starting the journey as well. So I think there could be some opportunities for some joint learning there as well. Maybe pick that up with them.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all volunteers on the Cipd committee, so we're in that same arena completely.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Right, I've got an eye on the time there. We have run over by sort of 10-15 minutes. So thank you very much, Adrian. Thank you very much, Heather, for talking to us tonight. That was very interesting. I know I've really improved my knowledge, which ashamedly was pretty non-existent about both your organisations. So thank you very much for your time. I'll give everybody for attending and wish you a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks again,
Well,
folks.
Nice
It's
to
really
meet
helpful.
you all.
Thank you. Very interesting, both presentations. Learned a lot.
Before you go, actually, Adrian and Heather, what it is, I'm going to put a post on social media, sort of summarizing what we've been talking about. Do you mind if I'll, link you in that post too? If I tag you in that post, are you happy for me to do this?
Yes, that's
So
brilliant.
this way we'll sort of spread the word. And the recording will be made available to our members as well. So if you're happy to do this, or if you're not happy, please let us know.
I don't like that bit, but it's fine. I've got a very deep voice because I had throat cancer in my late 20s, and I know I sound like a man when I speak.
Not at
not at
all,
all.
Heather, not at all.
I know.